Okay, so Dan Greening is combining these two worlds in what I think is a very effective, practical way, and also has a lot of depth and heart. So he comes from the software engineering world, much like yourself, the tech startup world, in which this concept of agile methodology has kind of come to, I'm going to say dominate, but I think there's just it's proven its mettle over the last 20 years or so that most businesses are need to adopt something like this or some of these frameworks just to compete. And Dan has positioned himself as a real expert, coach, trainer in this methodology. And he's combining that with his contemplative practices, with his background in Buddhism. And so his podcast, what I take as kind of his central creation is the melding of those two things, agile methodology and mindfulness. Can we just start in a broad way to talk about what this agile approach to business is and just wonder about it together for a few moments? Because it is a little remote to me still. And maybe to our listeners.
What did you, as someone, kind of, maybe it was your beginning, maybe not your first introduction to it, but as someone who's new to it, what did you get from Dan?
So the kind of, as I understood it before, and what I took from him is this central concept of the scrum, maybe is a good place to start. And that's maybe a term that sounds crazy or weird.
It's like a hockey thing, right?
Sure. No, I have no idea.
Rugby.
Okay.
It's a sport that ends with Y, I'm telling you.
Okay, good. Count on us for all of your expertise. We have the answers.
Some of the sports end in ball.
Sports ball. We're both big sports ball connoisseurs, and we could speak on it at length in another episode.
And then there's also sports Y, which are the other sports, the ones that don't end in ball.
Right. And we're pretty sure that scrum comes from one of the Y sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So we'll move on. I think that's probably clear enough for our listener. But what is it? So a scrum is basically a sprint. It's most often like a software sprint, right? Like you have this team. Another concept that Dan put forward, you picked up on very quickly, maybe we could tease that apart, is this idea of a minimal viable product. So the idea is you're this entrepreneur, you're asking questions, you have this hypothesis about something that might be a problem to a certain set of people. You think you might have a solution. And that solution is your product, ostensibly. And you hope. And so to test this hypothesis, here's another thing that I took out of the conversation, this central tenet of the Agile methodology is this attitude or this mindset of experimentation. Is that right? So all of this is starting to sound very familiar to some of the things we discuss with our clients. But this idea of an MVP is I have this hypothesis and I'm going to test. I've kind of constrained or formulated this test that's going to give me good feedback. And the point of my scrum is to get a solution in front of people as soon as possible. So I have these tight feedback loops. I would say that's maybe the other kind of core tenet. It's having really tight feedback loops. And then maybe this is the final thing that really puts it all together, but then a way or a process whereby you can take the feedback from that experiment and then iterate another, right? And then the process kind of starts all over again. There's this real cyclical sort of character that I sort of perceive the cyclical thing to Scrum management and to Agile.
Yeah, and I think the hope is that it's helical. Right, that it looks cyclical from one angle, but actually you're getting closer and closer.
When you say helical, I think 90s West Coast slang.
Like hella cool?
Yeah.
I mean like a helix.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that it's, let me help myself understand better what you mean, and also perhaps our listener. When you say helical, this idea of a spiraling, that it's getting better. Is that what you mean?
Cycle, and I'm like, oh man, I'm just like
stuck in a loop, in a K-hole or some bad acid trip or something. That's what you think. I don't know that. I've never been in a K-hole. So that's all great, and that process really optimizes. It's set up to create this field of experimentation where we have all these heuristics, or kind of moving towards this thing algorithmically, right? There's some formal process, taking the feedback, and like you're saying, making it this improvement cycle. At each cycle, I get the feedback and I optimize for some outcome. And for most businesses, that's either product market fit, some demand that they're noticing from their audience,
or just improving the product quality.
Okay.
Yeah.
But ultimately the bottom line.
Sure, for the businesses, because that's how they roll in capitalism.
Right. And it's not, and you guys don't shy away from that though. So that's why I want to bring that in, because it comes up. Like he has like this Marxism in his background. You've wrestled with capitalism in your own ways. You spoke about that a little bit in the conversation. But what I could understand and maybe read into is that, yes, this is a perfect, like well-oiled machine to develop products. But if it doesn't have a purpose to it, in other words, the thing that you're optimizing for kind of doesn't have an understanding of your interconnectedness to others, your interconnectedness to the environment, then there's some very basic and harmful externalities of that process in natural resources, in people's quality of life, perhaps.
Sure. I mean, that's just classic. That's what we see all around us. You know, that's just a critique of the world in which we live in. I think it's very little to do with Agile. Agile is just another tool. It's another methodology.
Right. But without being informed by something that maybe addresses that, what we're talking about here, the harm doing, then it's a very effective tool that may be potentially doing more harm. So I'm saying all that because then Dan is then introducing this other thing where he says that in the end, right? It's like it gets this part right, but it's missing compassion. And so I want to know what you think that means. So he says mindful. It's not necessarily intuitive because a lot of people use mindfulness, the term, and there's no mention of compassion or this interconnectedness. Maybe it's just about counting breaths or feeling a little less anxious, right? So how do you think that those, because he's obviously carved a whole life path of trying to create the synthesis between these two.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I love about what he's doing is he took this kind of business process methodology, this thing like, oh, I'm coming from the business world. I'm going to help people make better product iteration cycles or whatever it is. And he's like, oh, this is actually about experimentation. This is about a way of making something better. And he was able to like take it out of the business world and be like, this could be about making my mindset better. This could be about making my relationships better. This could be about making my life better in a different way if you just plop it into a different context. And so he's taking the tool that was created for one domain and applying it to another domain. So compassion. Yeah, it's an interesting feature of the kind of modern Buddhism movement. There's this guy, Daniel Ingram, whose presentation of it in his book, which is called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, which is fabulous, by the way. He has this very clear presentation. He's like, there's 3 parts of Buddhism. And they're all great. One of them is really about morality. One of them is about mastering concentration. And one of it is about having insight into the true nature of reality. He's like, and they're different. And people can master one and not the other. And there's like you're saying, there's a lot of people that are interested in growing their skills in concentration. And then there's all kinds of like mental powers that open up to you when you can concentrate better. But they may not be interested in growing their skills in morality, which is where the compassion lies, right? And so you can use this tool to improve your skills in product management. You could use it to improve your skills in concentration. Or you could use it to improve your skills in morality. So, and I just want to connect this to Momentum Lab. It's something we do. Like we focus a lot on purpose, right? And people are like trying to find, right, why am I here? What am I here to contribute? What am I here to do? And it's the same iterative process where we're just like, come up with something, try it out, like try it on, even if it's just a statement that you like read every day. And I'm like, is this just some shit I wrote, or does this actually describe me? The only way to know is to like try it on for a few days or a week or two, and then be like, you know what? That's not Right. Or, oh yeah, that really feels like it. And it's the same with vision or with your goals or anything. It's like this experimental process of I want to get prepped for running this marathon. Here are the different ways I could do it. And you like try different things like, oh, that's not motivating for me. That's not working. I'm going to try a different experiment next week. And I think it's all part of the same family of techniques that he's talking about with Agile.
Well, maybe not actually. But I'm glad you went there, because that was exactly where I was going to take it next. I think there's the third character in this play, and that is purpose. And Dan introduces it in a very practical way. And I love everything. Actually, maybe that's the soundbite for the episode, even though it's not Dan, it's you. But, I was speaking to one of our beloved new clients, Lena Marchese, just yesterday. And hearing her sort of struggling with the purpose module. And I think what you said really encapsulates an important shift in how we think about purpose. And I think Dan also offers some really great perspective. And the way I'll start with how I took Dan's approach to purpose was it was extremely practical. He starts with this example of the health commission of LA County or whatever that was. And this person that's applying for a grant. And actually the purpose in that situation that he helped this person articulate was really an expedient tool to helping them. And here's what I loved about it, because once they articulated this purpose, your purpose, LA Health Commission, is to improve the health outcomes of the most vulnerable populations. And then here's how this proposal is going to do that X, Y, and Z. And then here to me was the real kicker. The pitch then to LA County was, help me do that. So then you're enlisting, and then you can enlist people in that mission because you've taken the time to make it explicit. And I think that's the practicality, the efficiency of it is so important. And especially if we combine it with this attitude or the spirit of experimentation that you're saying. Because I think what people come up against in that process is they think maybe there's something predetermined here. Like God hid an Easter egg, and if I just look in the right places, I'll spit it out. It'll be a sentence. I'll never have to change it or revisit it. It'll give me my meaning of life.
God, that'd be awesome.
It would be awesome.
Kind of, if you could find it.
But alas.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to work that way. So instead, in comes this toolkit of the Agile methodology in this case, where we can take a guess at something, formulate a hypothesis of something, and then we have a way to construct the feedback loops to test it, to see, is this right? Are my assumptions about what I thought was a problem here, or what I thought was the solution for that problem, are those correct? And it doesn't have to be yes or no. And then here's the thing that I want to open up for you, because I think you love this topic, is the vegan discussion, or his example of this mother who's trying to bring her whole family vegan. And that in his coaching to her, to articulate this goal, kind of a level up, or kind of arrive at this meta, like, what's your real reason for wanting to be vegan? Okay, it's centered in this compassion for other beings. I want to be more aligned morally with my values. It gave her a way to evade kind of the zero sum trap. And I think like that sort of reductive or predetermined approach to purpose, you're like in the zero sum, either it is or it isn't. But if I take this other approach where I'm using my purpose to communicate something that's really a core value to me, I'm using it to interface with others, maybe enlist their support in a mission, it actually gives me a way to escape that. I don't have to be like all or nothing anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. And it's like almost you could rephrase the questions about purpose to something like how attuned to your purpose do you feel in this moment, rather than like, are you living your purpose? Or how much of your time is spent in alignment with what you consider your purpose to be, rather than like it's not just binary. Like you're either like made to be a fireman or not. It's just like, what about the activities that you're doing or providing the meaning that's really like the meaning that you're here to feel, to create? There's something else that occurred to me as you were talking, which is about, this is maybe another value of this kind of experimental methodology, is the permission to fail and the permission to iterate. Because normally you do something and you're like, oh man, it didn't work. But this is like the whole point is that it's not going to work.
Well, and that's a saying from that world, right? From that software world, fail faster, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so then that's what that means, right? So like get to the feedback loop, get to the feedback so that I can iterate.
Yeah. I think there's a few things that can mean. And part of it's like the lean or the MVP thing of if you're gonna know this is a bad idea, know quicker so you spend less money on it. So I think it's similar, but where I want to go with the permission is that I think it gives people kind of a psychological safety net to know that this is just one iteration of 10 or 20 or 100. Like we say, like in Momentum Lab, it's like a quarter. There's 91 chances. There's 13 weeks. There's 13 different experiments. There's no pressure that the experiment you're going to run this week has to work in any certain way, because it's just part of this long process, which is our life. Like I just interviewed Jeff Salzman, the host of the Daily Evolver. That'll be out in a few weeks. And it was so great. And it was just so clear that for him, his life is just an unfolding, mysterious experiment. And he has so little judgment or expectation of trying to know what's going to happen or control it. And this paradox, while he's being like really effective in the world and has all these like great projects, but it's just like, oh yeah, because it's just folly to have any idea for I think I know what's going to lead.
Yeah, but what you just said there actually reflects a pretty delicious alchemy, right? And the key word, I think, again, is experimentation. Because he could certainly be like, in the other extreme, maybe, like all the way in the camp of, I don't know what's going on. I'm surrendered to the flow and I'm not even watching. And I think the experimentation implies a certain watching. So yes, maybe you've surrendered a certain amount of control, but the control that's yours is observation. And when you say it's an experiment, I've surrendered to the experiment, well then, yes, but you're still a scientist. You still have some responsibility in the process.
Yeah, you're participating in the illusion of free will that we should all have. Because who knows the truth? But at least I feel like I have free will, so that's...
Was that important, do you suppose, to people?
It's important to me. That's the whole thing. If you don't act as if you have free will, like if you don't act as if you are the leader and you get to decide what happens with your mind-body complex, then you're totally just like, oh, I have no idea what's going on in this laid back way, where really it's like, I'm doing everything I can with this moment, knowing what I know about myself and about the world, without like relinquishing any attachment to me knowing what's going to happen next week.
Yeah. So let's take that back to purpose. Because I could see the same thing. You could take those same mindsets and sort of transpose them onto the purpose work, right? I can't figure it out means I don't have one, right? And I give up or I surrender to that. There's maybe the other extreme where it's, I know it's this and I'm not even kind of going to look underneath the surface or even do the work of inquiry there. But to bring in this experimentation thing again, I can test it. And any iteration of that can't be wrong. Is just going to be feedback into the system.
Yeah. And one test, I've been developing some coursework around this last week. And one test I thought, it's like, all right, how do you know if you came up with like a accurate purpose statement? Like for me, in my process that I want to lead people through, once you have a purpose statement, the next part, which is imagining what you want to create, your long-term vision or goals, it should be just like, almost write itself. Like the idea is that if the purpose statement is really getting you, then it should be so clear, like what is the ultimate, most beautiful manifestation of that individual purpose of yours in the next 10 or 20 or 50 years or whatever it is, like if that should just like almost like the purpose statement is this bud and the vision is this flower, it just opens up. And if you really like the flower, like the smell and the feel and the color of the flower, then you got the right purpose statement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I do. But listen, let me, and I hope this doesn't go against our beautiful corpus of work within Momentum Lab or what you're working on. But let me just sort of trouble that a little bit there. I wonder, in this Agile approach, I know our next step after the purpose is then to go way out into this time horizon, like 25 years, like you're saying, kind of the ultimate expression of that purpose, where what are the sort of structural manifestations, relationships, everything like that in your life, in the perfect world, in the most extreme manifestation of your purpose. How important do you think it is, not troubling that step at all, but how important is it to get to something quickly, to the point of this sort of MVP, for someone to actually get a test on the road fast? So some mini thing that they can try this week, this quarter, next 5 weeks or something like that.
I don't think it's important to, well, I mean, it really depends on the person. But I think in general, what's important is to do experiments with that sense of purpose and that imagination of the long-term vision. Because we have this amazing capacity of abstract thought. We can try those things on. You don't have to spend 25 years building something and then evaluating whether it works for us or not. Like we use the imagination, like read this thing and be like, oh God, does that actually feel good? Does that actually feel meaningful? Or is it just so like, oh, it seems like a lot of work. I don't want to do that. You can do it through your imagination, which is what I would recommend. Because I'm a big fan of having the short-term decisions, like, hey, I just got this job offer. Should I take it or not? Be rooted in an understanding of long-term decisions, the long-term visions. So that becomes a decision framework that makes these short-term decisions like effortless. It's like, hey, does it align with the vision that I feel really good about or not?
The experimentation loop then for you is happening in the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
You create this thing and then you create this imaginative world. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever done some purpose work? Oh, I got it. And then you go in and you write the vision, and the vision is super immaculate. This palace of achievement and different things you've created, projects and impact and all that. And then you're sitting in that vision and you're like, holy shit, this is not what I wanted at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it'll be more like this though. Cause you're often in the same mindset when you write and when you read. It's the same moment or the same day. So I'll have the purpose thing. I'll write the vision. I'll read it. I'll be like, yeah, man, this is dope. And then I'll read it the next day. And the way I recommend reading it is almost like a kind of theatrical. I don't know. You have a theater background, so you might have better vocab for this than me. Where it's not just like you're reading it out loud and you're trying to inhabit the emotional space of what's in there. You got some fancy theater word for that? Is that a thing?
Inhabiting the emotional space of the words you're saying?
Like feeling it as you read it.
I think they call that honesty.
Honesty. Okay. So you're like reading honestly.
Yeah.
We're going to trademark that. Reading honestly. Trademark Ankur and Nate. This thing, and I do that every day. Of course, that's what I'd recommend. And then sometimes by like day 5, I'm just like, you know what? This is bullshit.
This. You're not being honest.
Yeah. It's just like, It's like I thought, I kind of got intoxicated with it. And then after a while, the intoxication wears off and you're like, you know what? This is not me.
So, but is there another end to work it from? Because I'm all about options, and I love it when there's a possibility to enter something from two sides, kind of like our conversation with Edie, right? And so I wonder, can you also coach someone into that same process through the micro? Okay, so I have these values, I've done this purpose work, and I have a hypothesis about something that would kind of connect me to that now. And then I could actually try something, For instance, like the palliative care, which I haven't closed that loop yet, but I agreed to do some amount of hospice volunteer this quarter. So yeah, and it could be something like that, right? Where I thought, oh, this is going to be a meaningful moment for people's lives, and I care about people, and this is going to be an important thing for me to be present for, and this is going to be perfectly aligned with my value. And I go there, and I'm like, this is miserable, it's upsetting,
boring.
Right.
This probably wouldn't happen. But yeah.
Yeah. These people do not know how to party. You know what I mean, though? That I have the experience, and then I can go back then to my purpose and say, make some adjustments there that then in that long vision, that 25-year vision, that little course correction might be pretty substantial on that horizon.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And so that's I love that, because I was setting up this dichotomy between focusing on short-term decisions versus long-term vision that informs the short-term decisions, which I think is good. And so the idea is not to help someone. It's not to like, oh, well, then just think of your best outcome and make the decision about the job. It's not that. It's like, actually try something. If you like, do a day of that kind of job and see if you like it. Yeah, it's having that lived experience of it. And that's often like very necessary balance. Like we have a client who has this long-term vision of bringing like arts education and theater education to kids in foster care. She's feeling pretty burnt out about it, and was like, all right, well, maybe just check in, like go and like volunteer, get exposed to some of the kind of work that you would be doing, see some of the joy you would be creating. Be like, is this still meaningful? Like really, and I think that's really important, is to always, throughout the process, be able to feel the love, feel the joy, because that's the whole thing in my world. The good goals are the goals that like bring you this sense of joy and meaning and contribution and interconnection, and like, yes, this is what I'm here to do. So why ever go away from that? Why ever lose the opportunity to do that?
Is this where the mindfulness component shows up again? Just kind of transport this back into Dan's worldview. But is the mindfulness also then you're awake for the actual kind of feedback you get? You're present for that, or you're mindful of it and your experience in it, so that, I'm not just charging through things, feeling miserable, thinking that one day this is going to lead to something. There's actually like kind of a moment to moment presence to what my experience is in anything that I come up with here.
Oh yeah. And there's, obviously there can be infinite detail if we pay close enough attention, which is the whole point of mindfulness and concentration practice and all that. But like that misery can be information. It'd be like, oh, but it can also be like, is this miserable because I don't actually feel connected to this? Or is this miserable because I'm doing something difficult that I need to do? Is this miserable because I'm feeling fear? There's all, you can go into finer detail and be like, what are the roots of this misery?
Right. That's so profound what you just said, Ankur. I don't think all of our listeners take the time to acknowledge just how wise and potent some of your ideas are. So I want to amplify and unpack just a little bit. You, like, to say that there's infinite detail, to me, that's profound. That just like, it kicks me right in the throat to think that, and in a good way, because it means I can kind of develop my sensitivity to my experience without end, without limit. I can get more and more sensitive to myself and get more and more information. Any one of these experiences can just be endlessly informative.
Yeah. And have you, or this is to the listener, if you haven't done a meditation practice that involves paying attention to your sensations, like I did the Goenka 10-day Vipassana a few times, and that's one, there's others, but have you done anything like that?
The Feldenkrais method, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, when you do that, it's like, there's just infinite detail of sensation on a specific part of your body in the smallest amount of time. There's still infinite detail and variation that, at least at my level, just cannot be captured or understood. And I'm sure you can get to a level where, I don't know if you can get to a level where it's just, we should ask Lee Brasington. He knows where it's all transparent. You hit the bottom of the infinite detail, but I kind of don't think so.
That seems like a paradox, bottom of the infinite detail. Let me see if I can bring this in for a landing, because actually it seems like we came up with or you and Dan, maybe a little bit of assistance from me, had this formula here that we have sustainability, and the Agile methodologies is really wonderful alchemy or kind of synthesis of how we can approach things effectively, but mindfully. And in Dan's language, that involves a certain amount of compassion or understanding about how interconnected we are. What I'm kind of gleaning from this, or something maybe I'd like to try to implement, is that then the purpose comes in, or the inquiry into purpose then comes in as a really vital tool, or an efficient tool then to experiment with these two spheres, right? So that the purpose, I sensitize to the purpose through mindfulness, through approaching some of this infinite detail. And I don't need all of it. I just need enough of it to make some type of coherent sense or have a hypothesis. And from that hypothesis, then I can employ all of these tools from this toolkit that Dan's talking about, then to really mine that hypothesis, or to test it, and then to mine the information from that testing. So it informs the purpose work, which we already do in a really, I think, unique way, or maybe not unique in that it's different, but it's through this conversation already. I think I have some new ideas. My experiment.
Oh, with bated breath, we have awaited.
I think I would like to try this in my work with clients, because it's so relevant, and I'll be able to do it soon. But it's to use this to really, and maybe I'll spend some time after our conversation today refining how I explain it, but to use this formula as a way to kind of get people out of that reductive loop of, I just, maybe I don't have a purpose, or I can't think of what it is, and to move very quickly in this agile methodology. And so even just going back to you talking me through that, with that might sound like, maybe it looks like coming from either end, either the micro or the macro, or maybe your imagination exercise. Those are going to be the toolkits that I'm going to use. And then it's about constructing sort of a feedback loop that can be nice and tight, and it's very clear, the feedback that I'm getting kind of in my experience, in the details of how do I like this? Was it meaningful for me? All of that. But all of it can be kind of in that sphere of being live, being in the experiment, rather than kind of being stuck in your head trying to figure something out. All right. Thank you so much, Ank, for taking the time to unpack this stuff with me. Actually, this conversation just made it that much clearer how much I enjoyed Dan. What a character. I hope he's back, actually. I hope you have him back. And you mentioned in the conversation that you might be a guest on his podcast.
We're going to crash Dan Greening's hosting provider.
Right. That's
Boom.
Right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, hanging out with us. We really, really, really dearly, truly appreciate your attention. Check us out on Twitter, where I've been mixing it up on all sides of the political spectrum. Lots of hot takes coming out of our Twitter feed. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
That concludes another episode of the 10,000 Heroes Show. Thanks again for listening, and I hope that this has contributed in some small way to your own personal journey of heroism. I'd like to give a shout out to Pierre for the episode artwork, DJ Plainview for the theme music, and to our producer-editor, Martine. This podcast is sponsored by Momentum Lab, our year-long coaching program providing insight, accountability, a community of excellence, and one-on-one support. I encourage anyone who's intrigued to go to whatismomentumlab.com and explore. Finally, I love communication. If this episode has impacted your life in any way, let me know. Our email is info@10kh.show, and there's other ways to contact us in the show notes. Thank you, have a wonderful day, and take care.